Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Tom.
It's our literature unit, and we have picked a very, very popular book. It's called The House on Mango Street, and it was written by a woman who grew up in Chicago, and she's a Latina, is what we call the female versions. She's from Mexico. Her family is from Mexico, and she wrote about her own experiences. It is fiction. It's not a biography or an autobiography, but it is, based on her own life. And that's what a lot of authors actually use for material is their own experiences, their own life. Of course, that's where things come from. It's an interesting book, though, Tom, because instead of just writing in normal chapters, she almost is writing in a way that sounds like poetry, but it's not really poetry. And also, guys, this is called a novella because it's a very short novel. I think if it's under, was it 150 pages, 200 pages? It's considered a novella. So it's not very long, but I read a little bit of it earlier today, and she does write like someone who's writing poetry. It's pretty beautiful.
And so it's a book that's written for young readers. So maybe it's a book that you might consider reading yourself.
Yeah.
And it's all about this place called Mango Street in Chicago. And that's a street where there were lots of Mexican people living. And I think there were other people.
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Ricans, Puerto Ricanos there as well. And it's an interesting story, and it came out way back in 1984, but I'm sure it's a very interesting story that maybe you might consider reading yourself. So let's get to it. Let's read through the first part of our lesson for today, and then we will come back to discuss it. Adolescence is never easy. For Esperanza Cordero, the way she feels in her new home only makes the discomfort of adolescence worse. The House on Mango Street begins with Esperanza's description of her family's new home. It's a small red house with crumbling bricks and a water-damaged door. Instead of a spacious, beautiful yard, it has 4 skinny elm trees. It's still in a poor neighborhood, just like the previous 3 homes Esperanza remembers. As Esperanza settles in, though, she proves herself to be a keen observer of the inhabitants of her neighborhood. In Those Who Don't, an early chapter in the book, she describes the racism she sees. People who don't know any better are scared of her neighborhood. They see the young men standing on a corner as threats due to their heritage and skin color. However, Esperanza names each of them and places them within the context of their community. She knows her neighbors as complex humans with both good and bad qualities. Esperanza is also closely attuned to language. From the start, she wishes her name were different. Though it is a common name in Spanish and has the beautiful meaning of hope, Esperanza feels conflicted about it and thinks about the impact of changing it. She often works these tangled thoughts out in poetry, which she shares with some of the women in her life. Esperanza's dream of being a writer is something that she first sees as an escape from Mango Street. By the end of her story, though, she comes to realize that writing can be a way to express ideas, not only about herself, but also about her community.
Let's look at the title first, guys. It says, Exploring the Meaning of Home in the House on Mango Street. So, what does home really mean? Usually, a home refers to a place where you feel comfortable. You're surrounded by people who love you, who want to see you succeed in life. We're going to look at how Esperanza Cordero sees home, how she feels not so much surrounded by love. She sees her neighborhood as someplace that's holding her back from what she really desires. So let's take a look at the first sentence. Adolescence is never easy. Oh, is that true? That's true. Adolescence is that period of life when a child is developing into an adult. So I would say adolescence is probably, 12 to 18. You're changing a lot. You don't know who you are. You're feeling insecure. It's a tough period of time for anybody, even if they come from a really, really strong, stable family. So adolescence is the noun form. If you're talking about a young person, though, you call them an adolescent. So it's never easy. So the main character or the protagonist in this novella, this little short novel, is Esperanza Cordero. So she doesn't really feel comfortable in her new home. Her family has just moved into a home that she goes on to describe, but it says she feels discomfort there, and it makes her discomfort of adolescence worse. So if you're filled with discomfort or you're just not comfortable, you don't feel at ease. You feel anxious. Maybe you can't relax. You're stressed. So moving into a new house, and I'll have Tom describe the house to you, doesn't make her feel very good about her new neighborhood or home.
That's right. So, of course, if you're going through adolescence, you feel a certain amount of discomfort, and the house doesn't seem to help much. In fact, it makes her discomfort even worse. Now, the house on Mango Street begins with Esperanza's description of her family's new home. It's a small red house with crumbling bricks and a water-damaged door. So, of course, lots of houses in the United States are made from bricks. And they're kind of cute. A lot of brick houses in my hometown were actually quite attractive. But if they don't receive a lot of maintenance and care, over time, the bricks will kind of fall apart and they'll start to crumble, which means they kind of break apart and parts of them fall down to the ground. So this house has crumbling bricks. They're kind of old. They're probably kind of dry. And then the door is water damaged. The door could be made out of wood, but because of floods or rain and stuff like that, the door is kind of warped and it has a lot of water inside it, so it's kind of damaged and it's not a very attractive looking door.
Now, instead of a spacious, beautiful yard, it has 4 skinny elm trees. So if something's spacious, it has a lot of room. You could talk about a building or a room being spacious, or here we're talking about a backyard. Usually if you see beautiful yard, people in at least the US are typically thinking about a backyard. Although some people have a nice front yard. We have both where I grew up. It's a big front yard, a big backyard. We have a lot of land. And it's hard to take care of it because my parents made the kids grow up mowing the lawn and weeding and making sure the front yard and backyard looked good because they wanted us to learn how to work hard. So instead of having a really big, beautiful backyard, and she wants a spacious yard, they've got just 4 skinny elm trees. An elm tree is a tree you often see in the States. Do they have elm trees here, Tom?
Not that I know of. In just a second here, I'll look it up and tell you how you say it.
I don't think I've seen any myself, but I'm not a tree expert. I need my mom to point out elm trees to me.
Yeah, elms, of course, are subject to Dutch elm disease in North America. So a lot of elm trees actually died in the United States. There are still quite a few of them around.
But they're usually big and beautiful if they grow well.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, we had a big elm tree in my yard, but it unfortunately caught Dutch elm disease and had to be cut down. It's because of those nasty mosquitoes that get into it. And elm trees, of course, are suffering from that in the United States, but they're still around.
The elm tree in Chinese is 榆树.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. So in this particular case, her yard had elm trees, but they were very small and skinny. So I guess they were kind of saplings, or rather small trees.
Or
and
maybe they just hadn't taken care of them, right?
Right.
Previous
or could have been
owner.
damaged or something like that.
Yeah.
So again, there are 4 skinny elm trees there, and it's still in a poor neighborhood, just like the previous 3 homes Esperanza remembered. neighbors. So they did move into a new home. Maybe it's a little better, but it's still a home in a poor neighborhood, so I guess she's probably still very disappointed.
Now, moving on to the next paragraph, it says, as Esperanza settles in, she unpacks, gets used to the neighborhood. She wants to prove to herself, or she proves herself, demonstrates that she is very keen, or she is a keen observer of the people who live there. When you talk about someone who's keen, it just means someone who's very good at it. Keen is a great word, especially if you go and study, maybe get a master's degree or go to graduate school in the UK. You'll often hear them use that word keen. Oh, he's a keen musician. Just means he's very good. We don't use it so much in America, although you do hear it and you will definitely read it. So if you're keen, sometimes it means you've got a lot of enthusiasm for something, or you're just really good at something. So here I would say she's a very sharp observer of the inhabitants. Some people are really good at reading people, which just means they meet people and they can kind of see or tell what that person is like, what their personality is like. Some people are very good at that, others not so good. What does inhabitants mean, Tom?
Inhabitant, that refers to people who inhabit a place, and to inhabit just means to live in a certain place. So an inhabitant is a person who lives in a specific place. There are, about 3 million inhabitants in Taipei City, and in this particular case, she's a keen observer. She's a good people watcher in her neighborhood, and she kind of makes observations about the people who live there. She makes observations about the inhabitants of her neighborhood. Okay, so far we've got her living in her new house and making observations in her neighborhood. We'll come back and talk some more about this story in just a second, but right now we're going to take a break and listen to our Chinese teacher.
大家好，我是派老师。今天讲解的是8月份 Unit 14 Exploring the Meaning of Home.In the House on Mango Street 这个单元是文学介绍，这个月份要介绍的是 The House on Mango Street 芒果街上的小屋这本小说，总共有3天的学习内容。前2天介绍小说情节，最后1天探讨小说文学意涵以及作者介绍。第1天课文的第1段介绍了小说的主角 Esperanza Cordero， 第1段描述了他们家在一个贫穷的社区。我们一起看一下第1段的学习重点。第一个句子 Adolescence is never easy， 这是人生的一个阶段，就是青春期 Adolescence。 那请同学注意 Adolescent A-D-O-L-E-S-C-E-N-T 也是名词，但指的是青春期的青少年。第2个句子请同学看到，就是呢这个 Esperanza Cordero 它是旁白The way she feels in her new home， 在她的新家，她的感受怎么样 ？Only makes the discomfort of adolescence worse。她是在青春期的一个女孩子，她更觉得不自在。好，请看到第3个句子，她的新家是什么样的房子 ？It's a small red house with crumbling bricks and a water-damaged door。请同学看到这个 crumbling。这里当作形容词用，那 crumble 是动词，叫做崩塌。Many houses crumbled in this earthquake。在这个地震当中，有很多的房子就崩塌了。好，接下来请同学看到 water damaged， 这是一个复合形容词，它指的是 the door was damaged by water。接下来请同学看到第4个句子。A spacious, beautiful yard， 把 spacious 画起来就是宽敞的，空间很大的。透过第2段，我们了解到 Esperanza 观察到外人对他们社区的种族歧视，而他身在其中，他知道这些人不是只有外在的刻板印象，是有血有肉的身躯，有好有坏的特质。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. It's our literature unit. And this month, our book that we're featuring is called The House on Mango Street. So our girl, Esperanza Cordero, I'm just going to say it without the R's, guys. So she does have a Spanish name. She lives in a new house on Mango Street. But what's difficult for her is she's going through her adolescence, this period of life when you're changing from a child into an adult, and it's a difficult time for everyone. But she describes her new family's house as being small with crumbling bricks. The door's been water damaged, and she doesn't really have a big backyard. Instead, it's probably very small, and it has these 4 very skinny elm trees. It's still in a poor neighborhood, just like the previous 3 homes Esperanza remembers. So this is her 4th home she's lived in. But Tom, you grew up in the same house, didn't you, your whole life?
Well, not really.
Oh.
We lived in one house on North 15th Street until I was about 4, and then we moved to our other house, which we lived in all the way until I graduated from high school. So, yeah, I didn't have to move that much, but I guess Esperanza has to move a lot.
That's a lot, 4 times.
And this new house is, it's nice, but it's still disappointing. The yard is small, and it has crumbling red bricks and a water-damaged door. And in Those Who Don't, an early chapter in the book, she describes the racism she sees. So if you have different people living together, different races of people, then you're bound to have racism, especially if there are white people around. There's lots of racism there. They seem to always discriminate against black people and Mexicans and stuff like that. But I think racism is all over the place.
Oh, Tom, I have to just mention, I was just watching a show and the police were investigating a murder and they were looking for a nanny in New York City, and they went to one nanny and the nanny said, I don't talk to her. I'm from Haiti and she's from Mexico. We don't like each other. Ooh. So there's racism everywhere. It's not just white versus other races. It's blacks versus other races. It's Latinos who don't like other Latinos. It's kind of a mess. Most people get along, though, really.
Right, but in any case here, she does observe a lot of racism in the neighborhood, and people who don't know any better are scared of her neighborhood. So we often say this, well, you just don't know any better. In other words, you're not informed, you don't know the background about something, so people who are ignorant about their neighborhood are actually scared of it. If they knew a little more, maybe it wouldn't be so scary. And they see the young men standing on a corner as threats due to their heritage and skin color. So heritage just refers to your background, where you came from, which ethnic group you belong to. If you're black or Hispanic or Caucasian or whatever, that is your heritage. It could also refer to which country you're from, regardless of your race. But yes, they are perceived as threats because of their heritage and because of their skin color, which I assume would be black or brown or whatever.
Heritage also includes the traditions that you were raised with, maybe where your grandpa and grandma came from, and also the culture that's attached to that, as Tom said. So it says here, however, Esperanza names each of them. She's not afraid of the young men on the corner. She knows them. If you know them, then you have an awareness that other strangers don't have. So she places them within the context of their community. She sees them as part of her community, and she's not afraid of them like strangers are who just come into her neighborhood but don't live there. She knows her neighbors as complex humans. Everyone has some good qualities and everyone has bad qualities. Not everyone's all good and no one is all bad. You just have to get to know people. So moving on to the next paragraph, it says, Esperanza is also closely attuned to language. This verb, to be attuned to, just actually means you kind of understand it. It's something that you can understand. You're attuned to something. You feel a closeness to it. So she's feeling a closeness to language. She pays attention to it. She's very aware of it.
Okay, and from the start or from the beginning, she wishes her name were different, okay? I guess she doesn't like her name Esperanza. That's a beautiful name. Of
I
course,
think it's great.
Yeah, I've studied Spanish before. That's a beautiful word, and she should certainly not be ashamed of that, but I guess she is. She wishes she had a different name, and though it is a common name in Spanish and has the beautiful meaning of hope, Esperanza feels conflicted about it and thinks about the impact of changing it. So, of course, maybe she's ashamed that she doesn't have more of an English-sounding name or something like that. I'm not quite sure, but in any case, she wishes it were different, and she's conflicted about her name. Even though it does have a beautiful meaning in Spanish, it means hope, esperanza. But again, if you're conflicted about something, you just don't know how to feel about something. Is it good? Is it bad? I just don't know. I'm kind of caught in the middle.
Yeah, so you've got some really complex feelings. We often will use emotions or feelings with this word, conflicted emotions, conflicted feelings. You don't know which way you ultimately will go because, you've got feelings that are sort of at war with each other inside yourself, conflicted. So yeah, she's got some conflicted feelings about her name. And she wonders what will happen if she changes it. Now, she often works these tangled thoughts out in poetry. That's how some people really figure out what their feelings mean to them, what kind of actions they should go ahead and choose to do. They'll work out their feelings by writing things down. Everybody has a different method. It says here she has tangled thoughts. We use tangle to talk about things being twisted together. Your hair can be tangled, or you could be using some string or yarn that gets tangled into knots. But here it just means very complicated or confusing. We could say, oh, that movie or that book has a tangled plot. It was hard to figure it out.
Indeed, so she has these tangled thoughts, these confused thoughts, and she works them out in poetry. And as you said, lots of people kind of work out their problems by writing them down in a diary or a journal or whatever. I did that when I was younger. I continue to write in my journal until this day now, not necessarily to, work out some problems in my head, but just because I want to keep a record of things.
Sure.
But here, of course, she wants to work out these tangled thoughts in poetry. And poetry is special, of course. It has rhythm and it has rhyme. And, of course, she shares these poems with some of the women in her life. And this kind of writing is probably extra special because it is in poetic form. So it has a rhythm, it has a rhyme, and people just like that sort of thing. It's something you remember much longer.
Now, she has a dream of being a writer, and it's her way of trying to escape from Mango Street to do better financially so that she can get away. By the end of her story, though, she comes to realize or understand that writing can be a way to express ideas, not only about herself, but also about her community. Yeah, a lot of people do turn to writing to express themselves. There are lots of ways. Some people turn to art to express themselves, or maybe they get into music to express themselves. We're going to continue talking about this, guys, and the plot in day 2. But right now, we got to wrap this up. We're going to listen one more time to our Chinese teacher.
我们一起看一下第二段的学习重点。第一句 As Esperanza settles in， 请同学把 settles in 画起来。它指的意思就是安顿。Esperanza 安顿好了之后 She proves herself to be a keen observer of the inhabitants. 请同学把 a keen observer 画起来。用 keen 来形容观察者。Keen 指的是敏锐的。那请同学写上一个同义词叫 acute, A-C-U-T-E。好，接下来请看到第三个句子。People who don't know any better are scared of our neighborhood. 那这里 people who don't know any better 我们其实可以解释成不明就里的人。第四个句子 They see the young man standing on a corner as threats. 请同学把 The young man standing on the corner 括号起来，这里是受词。他们把这一些年轻人，哪些年轻人啊？在街角的这些年轻人看作威胁。后面的 heritage 指的是血统。接下来请看到第三段揭露了 Esperanza 的梦想与矛盾。他想成为作家，但他也想逃脱自己的成长环境。我们一起看一下第三段的学习重点。第一个句子，请同学把 attune to language 这个里画起来。所谓的 be 动词再加 attune to 再加一个名词当受词是什么意思呢？就是有能力去了解或者呢去辨识的意思。那所以这里我们可以说他对语言的感觉特别的灵敏。好，老师可以给大家一个例句哦。像我们都知道，妈妈其实对自己的宝宝非常的爱护，所以呢她对宝宝的反应也特别的敏感。我们可以说 A mother's ears are attuned to even the slightest variation in her baby's breathing。 妈妈对宝宝的呼吸声，哪怕这个呼吸声细微变化再怎么细微，她都能够敏锐地察觉出来。好，接着我们看一下第二个句子 She wishes her name were different。 请同学把 were 圈起来。由于在 wishes 后面，所以我们后面用假设语气，用 were， 不因为前面是第三人称单数 her name， 而是因为这里是假设语气，所以我们一律 be 动词我们就是用 were。 再来请看到第四个句子 She often works these tangled thoughts out in poetry。 那请同学注意到 tangle 这个形容词，它指的是纠结的。而 work out 呢，这里我们可以把它解释作厘清 work out a problem。 好，那请看到第五个句子，这里呢 sees she first sees as an escape from Mango Street。 其实这个 see 的用法跟第二段第四句一样，都是把什么看作什么。以上就是我们针对第一天课文内容所做的中文讲解，谢谢。
That's it for today, everybody, but we're going to continue to summarize our featured novel for the month of August, The House on Mango Street. Make sure you join us then. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.